Welcome to the Build It Better podcast powered by FrameCAD. Today we're going to have part 2 of our 2-part series with Dan Wies of Wies Offsite. First part, if you didn't get enough out of the first part, you'll certainly get enough out of this one. Let's dive right into it. I'm going to chase a rabbit because I saw this when I was reading through your bio this morning. One of the phrase that you like, that I like that you put here, and pushing your creative. That's not something that a lot of contractors and builders, that's not a term a lot of them use. I love pushing the creative and really pampering my creative side. Give me an example in your line of work, how that pushing your creative benefits.
Totally. So I think the backstory to that is, I didn't write that. My team did. So that really is Dan Wies is bio. So look at it like this. Like, I come from a background where I have a, hard-nosed second generation construction executive father, who's
old school construction.
Yeah. Great, old school, gruff, all those things. And then I have a mother who's an artist, and that's the environment that I grew up in.
There you go.
Who would paint paintings, teach art. She was an art teacher and all those different things, right? And I grew up out in the country and also very bored. So it caused me to have to be creative and find creative ways.
Sure.
And so, pushing creative really just comes around like, as business owners, managers, as we're talking about buildings, right? We're always looking for all these different ways that we can continue to evolve. I'm always looking for ways that I can continue to push the industry. And oftentimes, if you look at like my LinkedIn post, I'm never the one to post like, hey, look at this aerial wide lens shot of this job that we're doing.
Yeah.
Because we really believe that a lot of the beauty of what we bring, it's in the minutia. And so it's just even in the process of how we do things. It's in the procedures of how we do things. It's finding those ways around and operating in that, quote unquote, gray area, right? In a world full of engineers, there's seems to be an awful lot of gray area, right? And don't get me wrong, I love our engineers. We're great.
Yeah.
But, so think about it, it's like, so when somebody approaches me about a floor system, for example, I get this a lot because that's where a lot of the cost is in these projects. And so you're like, okay, well, we can use a webbed joist. We can, use whatever, metal deck, structural deck on load-bearing wall. We can, and like cause me to go out and get a MyTech UltraSpan agreement as well, just to be able to have these different levels. And so then even in that, it's how we're directing things. It's, helping our clients cut their spans down or whatever this looks like, right? We get into all these different aspects. So I know I'm not answering your question extremely great.
No, you
are.
Of the
examples that I have, I probably can't really talk about. But yeah, it's just things like that, right? It's digging into, okay, what is the best tool for what we have today? And then also, we do bring a lot of, we have some innovation that we're creating as well that I can't really talk a whole lot. And that's really where those kind of things for me, whereas I get my creative outlet.
But I know you don't feel like you answered it, but you did exactly what I think about when I think about what getting into offsite construction and the prefab world does to one's mind, because I find our new customers that are, let's say, come from the traditional metal stud drywall commercial framing world, and it's much easier for those guys to get into it than say the residential contractor to get into it, because they understand cold form steel. They've just built things at a different level. But what it does to your mind when you start understanding what the systems can do, and you start thinking about, well, what else can I do with this besides just make a wall panel, just make a truss, and you really start being creative really opens up a whole new world for the innovation, the different ways of doing things, not just necessarily in the system itself, but in installation, in panelizing, in how you put it together. Should the panel be 12 foot wide or 10 feet wide, or can I do one that's 40 foot tall? I mean, you really start pushing the envelope when you open up that creative side. So you answered the question perfectly, because that's exactly what this world, this living in this prefab world does.
Totally. You have a set of constraints to add on to what you're saying right now. And anytime that you have a set of constraints, that is going to naturally make you have to be more creative.
Yeah. It's that is what I think is the difference, and helps you win that next project. It's not just, nobody wants to be in a race to the bottom. I mean, that is not why anybody gets in the business, is that, okay, let's get in here, let's bid this against 10 or 12 other people, and whoever's the cheapest is going to get it, which it is so much the case still today. Well, that's not what any of us really want to be involved in. So that means we have to do things better. We have to think about better ways to give us that edge that will make the difference. So where do you see, like, where are we going with all of this? Where's it going to stop? What is, because I talk to a lot of people doing this podcast and just in general that say that same thing. Hey, I've got a lot of things on my mind right now I really can't share, but everybody's really pushing the envelope. Where are we going to stop? Where are we going?
So within these constraints that we currently have, I get this question quite a bit. Like, say, Dan, what's the next drywall or whatever it is? What's the next thing? And my answer always is, until, say for drywall, until we have another product that is as abundant as gypsum, that can meet the performance criteria of that for fire, sound, all these other things. And then we send it through 30 years of, UL testing and other testing, then we'll have the next drywall. Right. Are we going to continue to push? Absolutely. Right. Are we going to continue to evolve the industry? Absolutely. Where does it stop? I really don't know, because it's not going to. Innovation is going to continue to happen. You have all these different things, right? You have mass timber that's starting to gain, a good bit of traction. You have all these different building systems. I mean, it takes many, many decades for new things to come. And, for a long time, I think, we're going to continue to iterate on steel studs and drywall and concrete for a very long time, in my opinion.
You used the phrase many, many decades, and I see that playing itself out in the adoption of prefabricated cold form steel, and in any case of moving away from timber to light gauge steel. As much as I love the cold form steel side, and I'm not a wood hater, wood's never going to go away. Just as you mentioned, mass timber, they're innovating on the timber side too. So it's never going to go away. There's just some applications that maybe the timber is a better application for. But I do think that it's the long game. It is absolutely a long game. And anybody that's getting into prefab or offsite construction and thinking that it's going to be this be all, win all immediately, that's just not the way it really is. Is it a better way? Absolutely. And I think we can prove that. But is it a better way for everybody? Probably not. I don't know if you agree with that or not.
I would 100% agree. I tell clients every week, because, what we have going on here is really exciting. And, our process and our systems are really exciting. And I get a lot of phone calls saying, hey, I think this will work here. I think this will work there. And I, unfortunately, have to tell a lot of people, I just don't think that we're going to be able to deliver, to your expectations. And the last thing I want is anybody to have a bad experience with prefab, just because the project doesn't fit. We're more than happy to, do things with traditional methods all the time. And I think it just depends. I mean, there's a wide variety of applications, but there are some narrow sets that there aren't.
Yeah, well, and you and I both know people. I immediately have several that come to my mind that thought they were going to change the world and jumped in and buy a couple of systems, and they get commissioned or never get commissioned, and they're never used. I mean, and then they just wind up, gathering dust and being sold later down the road. It really does take a lot more than a piece of equipment and some software to make that change and to make things work.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It takes a team. I mean, really, what I tell people, I get a lot of phone calls from people starting roll forming operations. I'm always happy to talk to those folks, right, and do some experience share on that.
Yeah.
Because the very first thing I talk to them about, it's, well, who's your team? Who's going to be doing your modeling? Who's going to be your cold form engineer? Who's going to be, this and that? Because, I mean, without that team and without those folks behind you, that machine and a big factory is nothing but overhead drag.
You mentioned that you have several in-house detailers.
Yeah.
Did you go through in the beginning? Did you go through the same struggle that so many people go through in that example that you just mentioned? I'm going to get this. I can figure out the software. I've got a guy that knows CAD, and he can figure this out pretty quick. So I'm going to go ahead and make this jump, only to realize that it's so design led and so much of that spent in the beginning that now it's like, oh, wow, there's a part of my business that I've got to do something with and grow that I've never had to do. And that's have technical software, sharp design people as part of my staff. Did you go through that learning curve? And if not, how did you get around it?
So yes and no.
Okay.
So I knew that before I even bought a piece of equipment or had a factory, that was going to be our biggest struggle, because we are, literally putting together whatever in-house, whatever you want to call that, right? There's all kinds of different things, in-house shop drawings, right?
Mm-hmm.
With the cold menu, whatever that is, right? We're doing a lot of very technical things ahead of time. And Wies Drywall has always been very field focused, very technical, really good in that regard, actually poor at marketing, but really good on the technical side.
Yeah.
And so knowing that, like, if I don't have somebody who's on the ones and twos of our model ahead of time, then I'm going to have a whole bunch of people really pissed off at me for sending them just a bunch of junk. So even before I really even reached out to anybody at FrameCAD, before I even thought about buying a building, I started making relationships with detailers across the country.
Yeah.
And we can get people onboarded. We can start training internal folks. We can start doing all these things, because that team, I'm a very team oriented person. Team is only thing that matters, right? The equipment doesn't matter. It does, but they're tools.
There's always, that's a tool. Exactly.
Right. It's a tool, right? There's whatever, all the different screw guns that you can have, right? Does it really matter? I mean, it needs to be reliable. It needs to be dependable, but it's only as good as the person that's holding it.
Yeah.
And that's what I think a lot of people fail to understand and a lot of people fail to see.
Oh, it's a choke point. I mean, I hear it every day, even when we're talking to people that are looking into purchasing systems and they're doing their due diligence. One of the things that we really push much more so now than I believe that we used to is hey, listen, you need to start, if this is what you're going to do and you're going to go in, you really need to start working on this. Start doing trial versions, start learning software, start, really figuring out what you want to build in. What are your engineers comfortable with? Really, really find that sweet spot, if you will. We model jobs before we even prefabbed anything, just to understand the process and understand, what value we could extract from modeling to start with. How long it takes.
Started in the prefab recently.
Yeah. How long it takes, one of the things that was so overlooked was that, you're building a prefabricated panel that we don't go back out and touch again after it's installed. So every rough opening, everything has to be. And when do those usually happen? They usually happen after everything's been awarded, because of that infamous, XYZ type window or equal or approved equal. Well, in the competitive world, everybody's going for a cheapest price. And so they're all pricing this approved equal, and 6 people are bidding it, and it's not awarded until way after design's done. but you have to have those rough openings done. Just little things like that take so much time and effort and attention in the beginning. So team is everything, and good for you, wisdom on your part. I've got to jump back. You mentioned that you are a MyTech UltraSpan fabricator as well.
Yeah, correct.
What pushed you to that? I mean, you can shoot straight. I mean, that's why I'm asking you the question is.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately,
I think I know the answer, but
I mean, it was my clients, A, but then it just B, when we're getting into these spans, of things like having a webbed, truss out of one of our roll forming machines. It's not always the most efficient shape for spanning longer distances. Some of the calculations there are lacking.
Yeah, and you find more steel.
The engineering side of things, right? It's hard to find an engineer to stamp, say, some of those documents. So, I mean, and ultimately, MyTech is a St. Louis company. We've used their products for a very long time. And, we've got some really good relationships over there. And yeah, just being able to actually also too, just have that whole package, being able to come to us for either, multiple floor systems, for, large span roof trusses, all those things, and have the stamping and have the engineering, like all those different things. Just having a suite of products to be able to offer is
being
really
able to do
roof
trusses on 4-foot centers and things, those that I think one of the things that we found and one of the things that we're working on internally is to compete with that, obviously, because we found there was less steel in a UltraSpan truss than in a traditionally designed floor truss of the same kind. And you can get into things with cantilevering balconies and all those things that, yes, is it more labor intensive? Yes. Do you have to cut pieces and are you back to kind of a more traditional method? Yes. Do you have to have jigs and things like that? Yes. But ultimately, I think it's just, and they've been around a long time. And besides all that, Dave Boyd's good people. You have to admit.
Dave is incredible. He really is.
Dave's a good guy. Okay, I digress, but I don't get that opportunity much. The first factory that I helped set up, and we were a MyTech UltraSpan fabricator. It's what we started with. We started doing trusses and then said, if we're doing trusses for people, why aren't we doing walls and et cetera? So, and we are, FrameCAD, we are doing things to close that gap between a traditionally designed, and when I say that, what people see as how a wall is framed, that's the same way that the truss is typically done. We are working on ways, and we already have ways to make a stronger truss with less steel and get bigger spans. So we're working on it. What's next for you guys that you can tell us?
Well, we continue to see a lot of demand for these services, regionally speaking.
Is it picking up? Do you see the wave kind of, do you see it turning, the tide turning a little bit?
You have to get creative. If you just, again, like we talked about before, if you're just planning on buying a couple machines, sticking them in a 20 to 50,000 square foot facility, right, and just expecting people to flock to your door, it's not going to happen. However, if you go out and start really getting creative, and you have like what we're very fortunate to have, a legacy drywall business to be able to help. That's Correct. Not obviously our sole client, and they are separate companies. We have separate P&Ls. We have separate even ownership group for that matter. But we have a lot of access to some of those people, right, and some of those relationships to be able to offer services to clients that I've had for a long time.
Yeah.
And it's really beneficial to be able to do that. So yeah, I mean, we get into industrial, we get into hospitals. There's a lot of different things. You just, is finding the niche that really fits you.
Yeah.
I've got friends that, they build a lot of multifamily. That's awesome, right? I'm always envious of folks that can, go hammer out a lot of multifamily deals. Mm-hmm. We've had to get really creative on, putting prefab and implementing these things into different jobs. But, it's really given us, our company, really a diverse like experience set, to be able to then apply different things that we've learned from different projects.
Yeah. I think it's important. I see from so many people that they make an investment in roll forming equipment and then think that they need to chase everything. They need to chase tiny homes. They need to chase pods. They need to do this. They need to build dog houses and sheds and everything. And in some cases, yeah, that is your niche. That is what you're meant to do. I think you bring up a great point in that it's important to narrow that niche. I mean, make it a true niche. What is it that you want to do that you can do absolutely better than anybody else and provide the best service, and then stick to that. And if something else pops, then okay, if it works, fine, we'll do it. If not, we're going to stick with this and keep doing what we know how to do. Man, that's awesome stuff. I'm so glad that we finally caught up, and I believe we'll have more conversations down the road here and do this again. But Dan Wies, see, I did it, and I've got it written down. All this time I've been writing it down on a piece of paper so that I would pronounce. I've got it written down here about 6 different ways so I wouldn't mess up. How do people get in touch with you if they want to talk more about prefab offsite and specifically in your market?
Yeah, happily. People more than welcome to slide into my DMs on LinkedIn. I do get a lot of messages on there, but I do try to take a look at them pretty regularly. And that's just Dan Wies on LinkedIn. There's not too many Dan Wieses out in this world, so you'll probably find me pretty quick. You can also reach out to me on via my email, which is dwies@wiesoffsite.com, which is WIESOFFSITE, all one word. Mm-hmm. And those are probably the best ways to get in touch with me.
Yeah, and I will encourage folks to go to LinkedIn. You're very active on LinkedIn. I love your content because I think you have learned, and not recently, not to put you down, but I think you've learned that people don't. If you post about business every day and you're talking business every day, you get crickets for engagement. But I think you've dialed in because your content is a mix of, I want to say motivation. I mean, you can go all numbers of ways and tying it into what you're doing, which I think is brilliant. It's obviously working. So I do encourage folks not only go find him on LinkedIn, but connect with him, follow him. You'll get some good stuff out of it.
Thank you. Yeah, it's my life. So what you see on LinkedIn is really just things that either I've observed, I've seen, I'm personally dealing with.
Yeah. Great.
Or just general life. Yeah. And oftentimes the post and the picture, here's what I got to tell people sometimes, and I should do a better job at this. It is literally random. So sometimes the post doesn't always go with the picture. And so that's what's funny. It's like, I enjoy those comments because it's funny because I'm just like, I'll just scroll through my pictures and just be like, oh, that one looks nice. Sometimes it does.
Yeah.
I'm trying to
but I think it's again, one of those little dirty secrets that you've learned that posts with photos do better than posts without photos. So let's throw a photo in there and, get some better reach. It is there is an art to posting and growing on LinkedIn, but you do a great job.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Hats off to you. Well done on your success, what you guys are achieving. I mean, it really it's amazing. I'm going to try to make my way out there before too long. I'd love to stop by, see you. Maybe we can record something else. Is there anything else that you would want to tell people before we go away?
I was trying to think of something really smart and funny, but it didn't come to me right away. Right. The reality is, we're in construction, and whether you're a manufacturer, whether you're a contractor, whether you're an industrialized construction company, the team is what matters most. The folks that you have, whether it's the people that you actually pay money to and you're with every day, or whether it's the engineers and all the other service providers that you're with those are your team, and those people really matter. And having the right people on your side is the most important thing that you could ever have.
Well, you heard it directly from the mouth of Dan Wies. Man, I'm glad we got that out in the beginning, and we are going to pound that home. That I would love to say that's never going to happen again to you ever, but it's going to happen to you today from somebody. But well, you know what we always say when we end here, we've all built it the old way. Now let's go build it better. Thanks for joining us.